The dwarf stood in the doorway of the tavern. "G'day, tavern folk," he said. "I'm Emofa, and I've been hired to kill a werewolf that's been a real pain around here. So, any of you fellas a werewolf?" Blank stares answered him. "Ah, that's all right," said the dwarf, reaching into his backpack. "'Cause I brought with me a wand of werewolf finding, eh?" He pulled out a roughly cut branch. There were a few sniggers. "I don't think that's magical, dwarf," said someone from the darkness. "I think that's just a stick." Emofa smiled. "Yeah, exactly, mate." And he threw it across the room. Emofa was a little perplexed to see the whole tavern stand up, ready to chase it. "Ah, there's some good boys here then, eh?" he said. A dozen or so men contorted and shifted, bones cracking as fur sprouted. They turned their hungry red eyes on the dwarf. The biggest one stepped forward. "You plan on taking on the whole pack single-handed, dwarf?" Emofa shook his head. "Nah, mate." He drew the two blades that crossed his back. They shone silver in the moonlight. "I'm going to use both hands, eh?" One day, Emofa was chasing a wizard who stole a spellbook from the wizard library. Now, there's not much point running from Emofa. He's dwarf stubborn, tireless, and obsessed with completing his to-do list. So eventually, Emofa cornered the wizard in an old abandoned tower. The wizard, however, was still very confident, and said, "Foolish Emofa, you have fallen into my trap. Now hold still while I cast the most powerful spell from my new spell book." "Oh, that sounds good, mate," said Emofa. "But maybe start off with something small, eh? And work your way up to the tricky stuff." "Something small?" screamed the wizard. "But I am the great Chester. I have been studying the dark arts all my life. Can you even fathom the depths of my towering intellect?" "Oh, I'm getting a fair idea, mate," said Emofa. But the wizard cast his spell. There was a puff of smoke, and Chester was gone. "Oh, hey, Chester, that was great," said Emofa. "You've turned yourself invisible." "No, not quite," said Chester. "I'm down here. Something has gone horribly wrong." Emofa looked down. On the ground was a sword. It had an eye where the pommel should be. Emofa picked him up. "Oh, were you supposed to do that, mate?" "No, of course not," said Chester. "Well, can you turn yourself back?" asked Emofa. "Yes, of course, undoing the spell. It just requires some simple hand gestures." "Son of a bitch!" "Oh, stinks," said Emofa. "Hey, here's an idea, though. How about you and me travel around together and we have adventures? And maybe you find a wizard to change you back. How's that sound, mate?" Chester slowly nodded, and then said, "Emofa, stop making me slowly nod." But it was too late. Emofa took that as a yes, and sheathed the sword, and then they headed off, ready to start having choice adventures together. "Emofa," asked Chester, the wizard who had accidentally turned himself into a sword, "why were you chasing me anyway?" "Oh, I needed the spellbook, mate," said Emofa. "I had just popped into the wizard library and asked them to cast me a spell, and they said they could, but some bugger had just stolen the book the spell was in." "Ah, so we are going back to the wizard library. They do not like me much there," said Chester. "'Cause you keep stealing their spellbooks, mate." "Maybe so, but I cannot afford to be noticed by them. Fortunately, I am a master of disguise and deception," said Chester with a wink. Or maybe it was just a blink. It's hard to tell. 2 days later, Emofa arrived at the wizard's library. "Here you go, wizard fellas. I got your spellbook back." "Good work, Emofa," said the head wizard. "Come then, let us cast that spell." "And I am Doomblade," said Chester. "Forged by the gods themselves, 10,000 years ago." "Oh yeah, and I'm Jonesy Gingerdeath, and I was forged by the gods too, even longer ago," said Emofa. "Emofa, you do not need a new backstory," said Chester. "Very good," said the head wizard, ignoring them both. "Come along then, let's cast the spell and send you to hell." "You hear that?" whispered Emofa with a wink. "We're in, mate." Chester winked back rapidly. "No, wait, that's blinking. He's blinking in confusion. Where did he say he was sending us?" But it was too late. Emofa and Chester were off to hell. Emofa and his magical sword Chester arrive in hell. "Emofa, why are we in hell?" asked Chester. "Oh, I've lost somebody's dog down here, so I've come to get it back," said Emofa. "How do you lose a dog in hell?" "Oh, it's a long story, mate. Too long for this format. I'll fill you in as we go, eh?" "Very well, but let's be quick before something notices us." "Oh, I think it's too late for that, mate." "Well, well, looks like we have a lost wanderer. I lay claim to your weak mortal soul. You may, of course, try bargain for it back." "Oh, thanks, mate, but in situations like this, I prefer to let my sword do the talking." "Excellent idea, Emofa.
for I am a master of diplomacy and negotiation. Come, demon, let us enter a battle of wits. Ah, you were talking figuratively.
Well, I still think you made a lot of good points, mate, said Emofa.
Come on, let's get going, eh?
And Emofa and Chester went deeper into hell. Emofa and his magic sword Chester continued fighting their way across hell. Although Emofa's skin was like stone and his bones were like iron, the constant attacks were beginning to wear him down. He turned to Chester and said, "Hey mate, let's go in that cave for a bit of a break, eh?" Chester read the sign outside the cave. "Emofa, do you know what a beholder is?" he asked. "Oh, it's kind of like a beekeeper, but slightly more possessive, I think," said Emofa. "Oh, we might have some honey, mate." And before Chester could protest, Emofa ran deeper into the cave, where they indeed met the terrible beholder. "You dare enter my lair," said the beholder. "Intruders will be taught a lesson." "I bet you're a really good teacher too," said Emofa, "because you have lots of pupils." "What?" said the beholder. "'Cause your pupils are your eyes, you egg," said Emofa. After he slayed the beholder, Emofa, Chester, and Bumbles continued fighting their way across hell.